Homer's Odyssey. We find it in China, in India, in Greece, in Egypt, in Persia. We find it everywhere. This mysterious idea, the layers of which are the steps of a gigantic ladder. Now this ladder, if we are to believe Hermes, the great Egyptian mystic, the thaumaturgist, of whose life nothing is known. But anyway, in his emerald tablet, Hermes declares that the above is like the below, the superior is like the inferior, the lesser is like the greater is like the lesser. All things follow one immense pattern, and if anyone can break the mystery of that pattern in any one point, any one level, he has the key to the whole mystery. So for centuries men sought this key. Some believe they found it. There are many strange records of such discoveries. But gradually the majority of human beings became discouraged, disillusioned, locked within the band of sensory materialism. They gradually came in the end to a blind mystery. They could go so far and no further, and that which they sought faded away into the unknown. So to save themselves from the continual frustration on this level, most thinkers have finally decided to accept the physical universe as the great mystery and spend the ages now and to come trying to solve step by step the chemistry, the mathematics, the electronics of the universe. Now, in this particular point, we have two very great texts to work with. We have a realization of this in the complete miniature of life, which we call the human being. It has always been held in mysticism that the human being was a miniature of life, that anyone who could completely solve man could solve all other things. But at the moment, no one really seems to be that interested in solving man. The great purpose today is to fit man into the economic empire which we have created in this world. It is not what a man is that counts now. It's what he's worth by the hour. It is not really an effort to unfold the mystery of the internal of the human being, but merely to find remedies for his external ailments and to do what we could to extend his material existence. All of these things were secondary, but they became primary as individuals were disappointed one after another when they tried to explore the invisible causes of life. But in the philosophies of most nations, there has been this recognition that the solar system, the human body, and space itself are identical in law, identical in principles, differing only in magnitudes, and that we can explore them a little more carefully if we so desire. The Ptolemaic system of astronomy gradually verged into astrology, because astronomy had to do with what you did in this world, but very often it was inadequate. Astrology was not capable of solving the mysteries of human destiny. It could only proclaim them, or occasionally make a dramatic interpretation of some event. But actually, the astrology of the ancients was a form of psychology. As astronomy is a science, so astrology was a psychological philosophy. It had to do not with the visible forms of the solar system, but with principles, mathematically, scientifically, and hieroglyphically set forth. These researches, particularly those of Ptolemy of Alexandria, probably one of the first greatest astronomers, these researches were not primarily intended for prognostics. They were an effort to find out how the universe functioned, where all things come from, why and where they are going. And in order to do this, a new concept of the universe was gradually brought into existence. There is a very fine example of this concept in the Nuremberg Chronicle of 1498. This was the first encyclopedia and the first book of general knowledge. And the very beginning of it is this picture of the universe as it was to these people, mingling what they knew of science, but what was not yet scientific, and therefore got themselves labeled as superstitious fools by the more accurate modern researchers. So all the work of these older ones has been more or less downgraded, simply because it is assumed that they had not sense enough to be materialists, and that the materialism was the final proof of intelligence. Well, we're in a little bit of a bind right now on this point. We're not at all sure today that materialism is the solution of anything. It only seems to complicate things until no one can solve them. But now we go to the picture of the universe, as it was in the Nuremberg Chronicle and in early editions of astrological works which preceded Kepler and Tycho Brahe. And we find what? We find a series that looks like of interrelating circles, looking very much like the rings of a target. These rings were concentric, and in ancient times the earth was placed in the center, and around the earth in rings were the orbits of the 7 planets of that time, of which only 5 were actual planets. The Chinese had somewhat similar designs, but preferred to use squares and triangles. But this target-like solar system was the Placidian system of ancient days. It began on the face of the earth, and a ladder ascended from the surface of the earth to the extremity of the solar system, which to these people was the planet orb of Saturn. Above Saturn they had the empyrean, bordered on the inner side the world of the heavenly realms and regions, the abodes of deity. Therefore there were these 7 rings, concentric circles, ascending in order from the face of the earth, through the orbits of the moon, and then Mercury, then Venus, then the Sun, then Mars, then Jupiter, and finally Saturn. This was the target-like design, which for hundreds of years completely satisfied the needs of a world devoted to inward growth rather than to scientific complications. Now this target-like device, with its various rings, inspired a number of useful discoveries. Apparently it impelled Pythagoras to discover the octave, or the mystery of musical harmony. It permitted him also to discover the principal chords, and by stretching a thread or cord from the face of the earth to the upper end of the orbit of Saturn, he created a cosmic musical instrument. This has been reproduced in design and with diagrams of many values by Robert Fludd, the English Rosicrucian of the 17th century. Also, Fludd then took this design and laid it on the human body, and came to the conclusion that the 7-fold division of Pythagoras was equally applicable to the physical structure of the human being, not only his composition, but his actual physical body. Little by little, therefore, this septenary system took over as a means of discovering the essential pattern behind life, to find out, if possible, what was good and what was evil, what was real, what was unreal, what was honorable, what was false. All of these things were involved in the 7 deadly sins, the 7 cardinal virtues, one of which in each case was attributed to the planets. So they made a kind of moral universe by bringing all the moralities of life into the planetary structure. They also divided it into areas for continents. They divided the oceans from the land. They created the octave and set up the frets to discover the upper and lower octaves of music. They created a scale of sound, a palette of 7 colors. They developed all types of septenaries, and these septenaries are still more or less valuable. They knew the 7 senses. They also knew the 7 psychic powers of the human being. Everything was developed from a grand diagram. And when that diagram came down to us as on a flat sheet of paper, with the orbits of the planets and